Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're looking closely at some really powerful source material. It unpacks a story many of us know, but maybe from a fresh perspective, a story of faith under, well, incredible pressure.
That's right. We've been going through the insights from a sermon given right here at King's Christian Center in Old Town Swindon. That was Sunday, June 15th, 2025.
Yeah, delivered by Brother Joel Gaddam. And the title really sets the scene. In the den, but not alone. It focuses on Daniel chapter 6, specifically those verses 20 to 23, the morning after the lion's den.
Exactly. So our mission, our deep dive today, is really to pull out the key lessons Brother Joel shared. What can Daniel's whole experience teach us today? About facing trials, integrity, opposition, and crucially, trusting God's plan even when, well, things look pretty bleak.
Okay, let's dive in. The sermon starts by setting the scene, reminding us about Daniel's early life. Taken to Babylon as a teenager, really young, maybe 14, 15.
Yeah, imagine that. Just think about the upheaval, losing your home, your family, everything familiar dropped into a totally alien culture. But the key point made right away is Babylon could take his home, but it couldn't take God from him. His roots were already deep.
And this wasn't something that came later. The sermon really highlighted this early decision Daniel made. He purposed in his heart not to defile his body. That was early on. He stood firm as a teenager.
Yes, and Brother Joel really hammered this point about youth. He used that phrase, youth is vanity, old age is regret, stressing how vital it is to live intentional for God when you're young. It's a challenge for parents, for mentors, too, to guide young people.
Right. So apart from that early resolve, what else formed his foundation? What kept him anchored?
Well, prayer. His prayer life comes across as absolutely central. The sermon describes it as this disciplined rhythm 3 times a day. And it wasn't just a ritual, it was compared to essential food, like feeding a child. It's fundamental.
That's a powerful image, isn't it? Prayer not as a chore, but as actual sustenance. And the idea of leading by example in prayer within families, that came through strongly too.
Definitely. And it wasn't just, reciting words. It was presented as true dependence on God, pouring out your heart, but also listening, being ready to receive a word from God. Prayer as an anchor. That was the word used, holding you steady in life's storms.
So Daniel has this incredibly strong foundation built early on. Then the timeline jumps forward. Years pass, empires change. Now it's the Medo-Persian era. King Darius is on the throne. And Daniel, he's still there and not just surviving, but thriving.
He really stood out, didn't he? The sermon mentioned his exceptional qualities. He rose through the ranks, distinguished himself among all the other administrators, the satraps, so much so that the king was actually planning to promote him over the whole kingdom.
And that's where things get, well, messy. That success, that potential promotion, it sparked some serious jealousy among his colleagues.
It's a story as old as time, really. And the sermon connects it to things we still see, maybe even in our own workplaces, right? These other officials immediately started digging, trying to find some dirt, some corruption or negligence in his government work.
But they came up empty. The source material quotes it directly. They could find no corruption because he was trustworthy, neither corrupt nor negligent. What a testimony, especially for someone in that kind of high-stakes political environment.
It really is. Brother Joel strongly emphasized how our character, our integrity, especially out there in the secular world, at our jobs, it speaks volumes. That striving for diligence, for trustworthiness, it matters.
So professionally, he's untouchable, which leads them to a rather sinister conclusion about where they can attack him. The sermon points out their realization. We shall not find any charge against this Daniel unless we find it against him concerning the law of his God.
And boom, the whole conflict shifts. It's not about politics anymore. It's a direct assault on his faith. Brother Joel didn't pull any punches here either, talking about jealousy itself, how dangerous it is, even among believers. He referenced 1 Corinthians.
It's that reminder about the old man, the old nature still being there. The call is to actively put on the new man, to deal with those attitudes. Attitude, the sermon stressed, is key to overcoming things like jealousy.
Exactly. And Daniel's integrity, which stopped them in their tracks earlier, is shown to flow directly from his relationship with God. It reminded me of that proverb, about integrity guiding the upright.
Okay, so their normal tactics failed. Now they get cunning. They devise this trap aimed right at the heart of Daniel's devotion, his prayer life. They propose this decree, no praying to anyone but King Darius for 30 days. And the punishment, the lion's den.
And there's an interesting angle shared on King Darius here. Brother Joel suggested the king might have sort of lost his bearings for a moment. Pride. They appealed to his pride, attributing divinity to him, and he seems to have bought into it. Pride, the sermon called it, a dangerous syndrome.
Yeah, there was even that personal note from the preacher about feeling a kind of fear when praised, a reminder that all glory belongs to God, and staying humble keeps us stable, keeps us guided by the Spirit.
But that moment of pride, or maybe just political pressure for Darius, led to the critical step. He signed the decree, put it in writing, and under the laws of the Medes and Persians, that meant it was set in stone. Unalterable. Daniel was trapped.
So Daniel gets the news, this law specifically designed to catch him, carrying a death sentence for doing what he's always done. You'd expect, maybe, panic, public protest, running to the king to plead his case.
But his reaction, as the sermon highlighted, was totally different. Counterintuitive, really. No shouting, no arguing, no trying to rally support or justify himself to people first.
Instead, he goes home. To his upstairs room, he opens the windows facing Jerusalem, that symbolic act of connection, and he kneels down and prays 3 times a day, just like always. And, crucially, the text says he was giving thanks.
Giving thanks in that situation. It speaks volumes about his perspective, doesn't it? It shows total dependence. He wasn't looking for a human loophole, not even from the king who seemed to like him. He went straight to God. Brother Joel really emphasized that point. Horses and chariots cannot help. Only the might of God can help us.
There's such power in that consistency, isn't there? Praying as usual, even with a death sentence hanging over your head.
Of course, the plotters were watching. They found him praying exactly as they expected. They raced off to report him to the king, and there's a little detail noted here in how they presented him. Daniel, who was one of the exiles from Judah.
That sounds like trying to marginalize him, doesn't it? Reminding the king he's an outsider, maybe implying his loyalty is questionable. Brother Joel used that to talk about unity in Christ, even sharing a personal story about overcoming caste divisions. In Christ, those labels, caste, background, nationality, they just dissolve.
Now, King Darius's reaction when he hears Daniel broke the decree, it's quite revealing. The sermon says he was greatly distressed. He spent the rest of the day trying desperately to find a way out, to save Daniel.
Just think about that. The impact Daniel must have had on this pagan king for him to be so invested. It's a powerful example of how just living faithfully for God, even quietly, can deeply affect those around us, even those who don't share our faith.
But despite the king's best efforts, the plotters held firm. The law is the law. It's unalterable. So the order had to be given. Daniel was thrown into the lion's den.
I was in the den, facing the lions. And again, the sermon highlights Daniel's response, or lack thereof. Silence. No recorded complaints, no, why me, God?
And this led to a really important insight. God's deliverance isn't one size fits all. Sometimes, yes, he rescues us from the trial before it hits. Sometimes he walks through it with us. And sometimes the deliverance, the victory, is only clear after we've come out the other side. God has a unique plan.
The parallel was drawn to Jesus before Pilate. That silence, the world screams, defend yourself, justify yourself. But God's way, shown here, is different. It starts with trusting him, his promises, first. The testimony that this sermon suggested flows from that trust, not from our frantic self-justification.
Then the den is sealed. A big stone rolled over the entrance, stamped with the king's seal, the noble seals. Official. Final. From the enemy's viewpoint, that was it. Done deal. Chapter close, as Brother Joel put it.
And the sermon drew that powerful parallel to Satan's perspective at the cross, thinking Jesus was finished, defeated. But really it wasn't the end. It was the start of everything new, a glorious era.
That's such strong encouragement for you, listening now. When everything and everyone seems to be saying chapter close on your situation, on your struggles, the message is, hold on, trust God. Because as the sermon said, the chapter starts now, precisely because God is with you in that den, whatever it looks like.
And the contrast between the king and Daniel that night is stark. Darius is up all night, pacing, fasting, anxious. Daniel, well, the implication is he's probably sleeping soundly amidst the lions. Supernatural peace.
Come morning, the king's anxiety is just palpable. He hurries to the den at the first light. His voice, the text says, is anguished.
And he calls out that crucial question, full of desperate hope. Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God whom you serve continually been able to rescue you from the lions?
Servant of the living God. That title wasn't just handed out. Daniel earned it by how he lived. And it highlights the nature of his God living. Active, powerful. Unlike the idols that couldn't hear or see or speak, Brother Joel stressed that this living God still speaks, still changes lives today. We shouldn't let doubt or negativity undermine that truth.
Then, after what must have felt like an age of silence, the voice comes from the den. The moment of truth. Daniel replies, O king, live forever. My God sent his angel, and he shut the mouths of the lions.
Wow. Just wow. clear confirmation. Daniel was absolutely not alone down there. God was with him, actively intervening through his angel.
The sermon also preempted some of the skepticism, people saying, oh, maybe the lions weren't hungry, or maybe Daniel hid somewhere, remembering Daniel was an old man by this point. These doubts were identified as attacks on faith, ultimately from the enemy.
And then Daniel gives the reason for his deliverance. It wasn't his cleverness or his physical strength. He says, because I was found innocent in his sight, in God's sight. Then significantly, he adds, also before you, O king, I have done no wrong.
That timing is key, isn't it? It reinforces that earlier point. Trust God's verdict first, his vindication. Your standing before him is primary. Then comes the justification before people. His deliverance secured his reputation before the king.
And the effect on Darius, it was transformative. He didn't just let Daniel out. He issued a brand new decree to his entire kingdom, telling everyone to fear and reverence Daniel's God, recognizing him as the living God, eternal, powerful. Daniel's ordeal, his faithfulness, directly impacted national policy, you could say.
And this is where Brother Joel zoomed out, showing the bigger picture, connecting Daniel's personal trial to God's grander strategy. He linked it forward to the book of Ezra, pointing out that King Cyrus, who had appointed Darius, was later prompted by God, fulfilling Jeremiah's prophecy, to let the Jewish exiles go back to Jerusalem to rebuild the temple.
So this incredibly painful, dangerous experience for Daniel wasn't random. It was woven into God's master plan, God as the master weaver, that was the image used, taking even the dark threads of suffering and opposition and weaving them into something purposeful, something beautiful in his time.
Which brings such profound encouragement, doesn't it? For you listening, when you're going through hardship, pain, whatever your den looks like, it doesn't mean God's abandoned you. Far from it. He's working in you, through you, even in that fire, preparing a testimony. And the sermon was clear. This isn't just wishful thinking. It's a truth demonstrated again and again.
Absolutely. God is still weaving today, using our lives, our challenges to fulfill his purposes and create testimonies that point back to him.
So wrapping this up, what are the big takeaways from this deep dive into the Sermon on Daniel? It really hammers home the need for that solid foundation in God, built by deliberate choices, especially when young, and sustained by real dependent prayer.
Yeah, and it's a stark warning about jealousy and pride, but also a huge encouragement about God's protection and his faithfulness when we choose integrity, even when it's hard, even when it seems costly.
And maybe the most powerful point, when we face our own lion's dens, whatever challenges feel like they could consume us, opposition, illness, loss, uncertainty, we are fundamentally not alone. God is there. He's working the plan, the master weaver. Even if we can only see tangled threads from our perspective, our trials aren't just endings. They can be the very things God uses to shape a powerful story through our lives.
It definitely reframes how you might look at difficulties, doesn't it?
It really does. So here's a final thought to leave with you, something to chew on based on all this. How might really grasping this truth that God is always present, actively working through your challenges, maybe even preparing your testimony right now, how might that change the way you face the next thing that feels completely overwhelming? Just something to think about.